So this is basically where all the primary cities were at. So you can see Brisbane approaching the winner's curse phase, Perth clearly within its winner's curse phase, Geelong, Melbourne and Newcastle already past the 6 o'clock mark and generally starting to build quite strongly. Central Coast approaching it, Sydney towards the latter stages of the stabilisation phase, and Wollongong going sort of past the midpoint of its stabilisation phase as well. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of all the cities and the markets. So I'm going to get into this chronologically now, in the best locations pretty much to, I'd say, the worst. And I'm actually going to include Hobart in this as well because I think it's important. So I'll start there with Melbourne. So look, the thing about Melbourne is there's next to no bargains on the market now. There were bargains last month. I'm telling you, they don't exist anymore. The market's turned too much. All the areas I literally buy in. To give you an idea, I looked at all the suburbs I'm looking at the moment and the clearance rates of all of them. To give you an idea, literally one did not sell at market. All the rest had sold, either at auction or just after the auction. And the one property that didn't sell, they are asking for like $200,000 over what I would pay for it, to give you an idea. So that might be the reason why they didn't sell, but that is incredible because there's more than 100 properties there that would have gone to auction on the weekend or for sale, and only one of them didn't sell. So that's crazy. Developers are starting to creep back to the market. So the particularly well-located properties where the markets are moving up, developers can see the potential, so they're coming back. I should say as well, there are a lot of Sydney buyers coming into this market. There are a lot of companies where you can work, particularly professional companies. It could even be like hospitals, doctors, and all those kinds of guys, those professionals, dentists, where you can live in both Sydney and Melbourne with companies, no problems at all. To give everyone an idea, Melbourne is about 60% cheaper than Sydney at the moment. It's less than half the price for the key suburbs. So a lot of your wealthier Sydney buyers are just seeing value. I wouldn't even say wealthy. I'd say buyers who can only just get into the Sydney market. A lot of them are coming into Melbourne now, and they're starting to buy up all the stock because, I mean, they can afford like a premier suburb of Melbourne rather than a middle ring one of Sydney. So that's what's happening. Properties close to village and town centres doing well. I did previously mention that. Melbourne is very much an urban city. So a lot of these sorts of areas are doing very well, close to those sort of little villagey township kind of areas. Inner suburbs becoming incredibly tightly held. I mean, those areas are performing very well. Particularly these areas, I mean, what's happening here is, first of all, they don't like selling their properties in the first place, and now they're becoming even more tightly held because people know the market's going up. And furthermore, not only with the market going up, but what's also happening is people want higher prices, so they're only selling it if they're getting the key prices. Now, to add to this, there's been particularly strong growth in some inner suburbs such as Chirac, Sunshine and Brunswick. So the sales here been crazy. One in Chirac went for more than 30 mil the other day. There's ones that go for more, but that's one. Sunshine, there's some going for like $900,000, and I was picking some of these up in the sevens last year to give you an idea. So that's something that's going on. To give you an idea, I had a client who bought in Sunshine West for $562 last year, brick veneer and tile home, reasonable interior, 500 metre square plus block. That now would probably be worth at least $700,000, and that's only in the space of a year. So this changes. Brunswick as well, there's stuff going for like $2 million plus quite regularly now. That wasn't a thing probably 6 to 12 months ago. So, yeah, that's another one. Great opportunities still within the 10K ring or so. You could probably say 10 to 15. Really good opportunities still in that. So, look, that's the Melbourne market, definitely shifting quite a bit. Let's get into Geelong. So, Geelong has skipped in terms of the property clock where Melbourne is at. And it's because there are euphoric investors buying up here. I had people of mine buying in Corio for $445, literally right up to about $470,000, $480,000 or so last year. All of those properties now are somewhere between $550,000 to $600,000, every single one of them. So they've made like $100,000 on a property sub $500,000 in the space of a year, which is like literally more than 20% growth, which is insane numbers. So that's what's happening. I'm seeing stuff even in like places like Corio go for like, I mean, literally like $600,000+. So that's what's going on. Now, unlike last month, all markets are now moving up. There were suburbs in Geelong at the time that was still kind of a little bit stagnant. That has completely changed. Every single one of them are moving up now. The inner suburbs have extremely tight stock. Now, not that I thought anyone would think otherwise, but that's become even tighter. I did mention previously rents are continuing to increase, some by close to $100 per week in the past 12 months. So anywhere between Newcombe around to Belmont to Draw Circle, pretty much all of them have done pretty much close to $100 a week, some usually between 60 and 100 in terms of the last 12 months for the same dwelling. And it's even just original to it that are getting good numbers as well. There's a lot of interstate buyers agents and buyers in the market too. Now, a lot of these ones don't know the market and they're just throwing numbers at anything. Even these buyers agents, a lot of them have never even seen these properties. Some of them have never even seen a walkthrough video of any photos of them. They're just throwing numbers at them because they can. So that's something that's happening. There's a lot of more long-term money moving into the inner suburbs. So the outer suburbs don't have as much. They're quite investor-heavy at the moment. A lot of the inner suburbs do have a lot of long-term money going into them. Suburbs such as Corio, Herne Hill, and Belmont have had some major sales. So I've seen properties in Corio go, as I said, above 600, Herne Hill above $1 million, and Belmont well above $1 million too. They're becoming more common. That's only going to continue. So that's my Geelong market. Probably the most and largest moving market, probably I'd say, of the last probably month or so. That is Geelong. To get into Newcastle, I don't think anyone should be surprised about this. I've been talking about this quite regularly. Continuing strong demand in Wards 1 and 2. Wards 1 is the inner city and inner west location of Newcastle. Ward 2 is the inner city and beaches location in Newcastle. Well-located homes selling within 2 weeks. Look, there's not much really in Newcastle that is not selling within 2 weeks. It is a well-located home. I'm seeing even dodgier stock going for that as well. Some streets have increased by over 20% in a single year. I mean, I had a client who bought in the late 800s in Mayfield. The properties in that same street selling for $1.1 and $1.2 million at the moment. So, I mean, that's kind of what's going on. No surprises. That's more than 20, but that was a conservative number. Flippers are particularly present in certain markets, particularly for well-located weatherboard cottages. I should say well-located. These properties that are well-located, flippers know that there is a massive upside here. So some suburbs, for example, I mean, you could flip a property, probably spend 50 to 100 grand on it, for example, and probably then turn over a profit of, $500 to $700,000. So people have done that in these suburbs, and that is set to continue. They are quite popular here. Very strong sales in Mayfield, Merriweather, and Maryville. Mayfield has had a number of sales above 1.2 million, particularly in certain pockets of it. Merriweather has had plenty over 2.5 regularly. Maryville has some that are going above 1.5 and some that will even sell for close to 2. And it's still got some on the market that are set to do that as well. So, that's kind of what's going on there. Streets, records, about to be broken in many suburbs. So there's a lot of suburbs here where you're going to get the highest ever sale on the streets. The market has shifted quite a bit and they are leading the charge in a lot of these areas. So, that's what's kind of going on in Newcastle in the month of October at the moment. Let's get into the Central Coast. So the Central Coast, we've got increasing demand. Like I said previously, there is a lot of demand in the Central Coast coming into the market, especially because of the 5% deposit scheme. Transport and lifestyle properties are doing well. So the Central Coast is quite spread out, but the ones in the growth corridors and the corridors that are close to the lifestyle areas and transport/employment areas are doing very well. I've been speaking about this for a long time. There's quite a lot of opportunity in flipper/renovation type homes. So because a lot of people from Sydney are moving up here, a lot of them don't want to do anything to the properties. Some are investing there too, and they just don't like the idea of it, though you pick them up a long way below market and make a lot of capital gain if you have the money to do so. When I say flipper and renovator, I mean anywhere from about $15,000 right up to $50,000. Some of these are perfectly fine properties. They could just do with a paint, maybe change a little bit of the kitchen, maybe the cooker, the range hood, maybe you regrout the bathroom. That if you did that all yourself, you can, I kid you not, you can do that for like sub 10 grand. But even if you get someone to do it, it shouldn't cost much more than 15 if you know a few people. So it's not too bad. All suburbs beginning to move upwards. So I wouldn't say a single one of these suburbs is in a stabilisation phase anymore. Every suburb, I would say, in the Central Coast is moving towards a sort of more, I'd say, turning towards the 6 o'clock mark, so much more. Strong sales in Killarney Vale, Blue Bay, and Terrigal. Killarney Vale's had a number of sales over 1.5 million in the last month or so. Blue Bay's had some above 2. Terrigal's had some well over 3. So these are, mind you, those are all key markets that I have mentioned in the past and are quite good. Dream home property is becoming particularly hard to source well for the average buyer. Now, I said this plenty of times. If you're looking for a very, very kind of dream, I'd say luxury trophy home, the Central Coast does have some of them. When the market heats up, what they do is they take them off market and you cannot buy them anymore unless you know an agent. And when they take it to market, they sell for 20 to 30% above market. It's just what happens. Maybe 30 is a bit much, maybe 10 to 20, but I've seen them definitely sell for 20% above market. So that's what's happening now. If you want a dream home on the coast, you're probably going to have to use someone like me as a buyer's agent to get it, because it'll be very hard to get one for the right price now when the market shifts. It's just what happens. So that's the Central Coast at the moment. Sydney, demand has increased in all locations and there are many cash buyers. So, I've seen cash buyers everywhere in Sydney at the moment. It's not normal money in the market. Every single suburb is now starting to move. It is some stronger than others, particularly transport locations and future land centres, as you can see in points number 3 and 4. Transport centres are going to be the future, should I say, large employment hubs of Sydney, so that is an important thing. So if you're close to that, you're doing well. Future land centres, land supply decreasing. If you need any land banking, any of these major areas, that land is so scarce that I doubt you're going to be able to buy that for a cheaper price in a couple of years, because land has become so scarce and it's developers just wanting to buy all of it to put 20-story plus apartment blocks up. Particularly strong sales in Rose Bay, Rozelle, and Mossman. I know I mentioned Mossman last time, I'll mention it again. Rose Bay, there's a sale that went for over 30 mil the other day. 30 mil's not that super expensive in Rose Bay, but it wasn't in the most expensive street, so it's quite good. Rozelle, I'm seeing plenty go for above well into the mid-3s plus. Don't get me wrong, you do get that, but when you see multiple, that's a good sign of what's going on. Mossman, there was one that sold for well over 20 the other day towards Balmoral. Sorry, not Melbourne, Balmoral. That's another good example. Now, in the Woollahra Council, 30 mil is fairly common. Mossman, it isn't as common because it is a little bit cheaper than, should I say, Woollahra. So that's kind of what's going on. Many $3+ million sales, even in the southwest/western corridor. So that I'm talking about from basically Penrith, Richmond, that's kind of northwest, but Penrith, Richmond, right out to kind of Campbelltown, Camden region. That's kind of your far out of Sydney. I have a good friend of mine who sells properties in a place called Harrington Park. He had a vendor he was doing an appraisal for. I just met with him for dinner, and he told me that this appraisal he gave was, he said, we gave it a $2.5 to $2.75 million budget, 900 square metre block, so decent block, but it's still like $50K from the CBD, mind you. Anyway, the actual vendor then asked for $3 million, and they thought it wasn't even achievable. But then they had offers of $3 million in the first week. The vendor still said no, stuck out for another one, and ended up getting $3.27 million in Harrington Park. And that was a cash buyer, to give you an idea. That's 50Ks from Sydney CBD, and it's a non-acreage home. It's just on 900 square metres. So that's what's going on in Sydney. It's not average people buying these. It's people with quite substantial money. A lot of cash purchases going on at the moment, and not only cash purchases of people, also even with very insignificant LVRs. There's people who are buying like $3 and $4 million properties, getting a mortgage of like $800,000, to give you an idea. Not even that big. So that's what's going on in Sydney, quite common at the moment. To get into Wollongong, we've got a fairly flat market, slowly starting to increase in some locations, and well-located suburbs are in strong demand. So, they're always in strong demand in Wollongong. The escarpment itself, so the high hills, as you can see in this photo behind there, limit the supply. So as you can see, little land available in some locations, very few on market. That's what happens in Wollongong. It's very common amongst Wollongong suburbs. It's just kind of what happens in these areas. So, if you don't know it well, that's what's going on. I did mention previously, and it's still the case, many large-scale unit developers, particularly between the station and Main Beach. So where that lighthouse is, if you go straight up sort of towards the escarpment there, the main Wollongong stations there. There's shitloads. Sorry, not shit. I shouldn't say shitloads. There's a lot of apartment developments going on there. And what's going on there too is the land's becoming extremely scarce. People asking more for the land as well, even on old dwellings. So that's pretty common in that area now. Strong sales in Shell Harbour and southern Wollongong suburbs. So these areas really, they're starting to really pick up. Places, for example, like Barak Heights, Warilla, Mount Regal, even parts of Port Kembla. It's very hard to find something sub 800 grand now. I've been speaking about this for a long time, but that's kind of what's going on. But there's still good opportunity in blue chip northern suburbs. So particularly between, I'd say, North Wollongong and probably Woonona, not all, but most of those suburbs in between are kind of still fairly stable. And there's some great opportunities, and they're all very good locations as well. So that's pretty much my summary of the Wollongong market at the moment. Look, to get into Hobart, again, as I said previously, it's a fairly flat market. Although vacancy rates are beginning to fall and stock levels are beginning to even out. So, because of this, what's happening is rents are actually starting to increase again in some suburbs. And it's underlying quite a good market probably in the next couple of years when it starts to break. It's probably one that's going to just stay stable for a little while, but when it breaks, it'll do quite well. Some solid sales in main suburbs and larger estates around the city, particularly in West Hobart and Newtown. They're both kind of inner city / inner northern suburbs within about 4K, 5K of the CBD. West Hobart's just west of the CBD like its name. But there's properties going in there well above $1 million now. So it's a good thing you're kind of seeing there. Good opportunity around the city for low risk investments. So, you can buy places here, for example, for sub 650 grand within about a 15-minute drive of the CBD or so. Rent for around 500 or so a week to 550. So very low risk because, as I said to you, you're buying it in a stabilisation phase. So you're not going to lose money. It's just probably going to stabilise for a number of years. But cash flow wise, it's not too bad. So it's pretty good in that. But Hobart's probably one of those markets where I'd say it's a pretty much a risk off kind of asset. So it's pretty good for those kinds of things. So that's Hobart there. To get into Brisbane, very strong results in the inner north and east. I don't really have to talk about this, but they're really looking frothy in some locations. And I've just written here, strong demand for larger family homes in quiet streets in well-known school zone / proximity. Some of these areas now, you've got properties selling for well over $2 million, like sub 700,000 or sub 800,000, like in 2019, 2020. So they're quite frothy, although the vacancy rates, again, sadly, are starting to fall again. The government did take, and obviously with compensation homes for the Olympics and that kind of thing. And you can just look at any highway in Brisbane under a bridge or some major parks. There's one in where is it? I can't remember. I think it's in the north towards Moreton Bay, particularly. There's one up there that I remember going past only a few months ago. And I kid you not, it was probably there would have been almost 50 tents as one near Jimboomba, where there was more than 50 tents when I was driving down towards Bow Desert one time. And that's only continuing, so that's no surprise. Job growth in inner suburbs is driving quite a bit of growth as well. And because of that, these are particular suburbs where those are closest. Seven Hills, Clayfield and West End have all had good results. Clayfield has said some sell well above 3 mil. Seven Hills well above 2. West End, the premier ones are there selling above 4, to give you an idea. So there's some very, very expensive places in Brisbane now. It's crazy how much they are, but that's just what's going on. Not only that too, but there is some great opportunities in neighbouring spillover suburbs. I would buy in the inner east and inner north still to give you an idea. And some of the suburbs are underpriced there, but we are getting towards the latter stage of the Brisbane cycle. But that's where Brisbane's at the moment. Let's get into Perth. And obviously, as I've said previously, it is looking extremely frothy, particularly some locations. Although there's still strong demand and particularly strong sales towards the northern suburbs close to job hubs. No surprise there. The north of Perth CBD generally is a longer should I say, term resident population. Quite a lot of the wealthier families do live there. Some outer exurbs starting to show larger signs of slowing down. So this is no surprise. I mean, some of these suburbs don't have much around them, and they're quite expensive, don't get me wrong, for what they used to be. So that is starting to show signs of slowing down. In saying that, the Perth economy is still very strong. I'm not going to doubt the WA economy, and Perth particularly. It is still quite strong. So that's a good thing. Some very strong sales in Joondalup, South Perth and Fremantle. I've seen Joondalup, some go for above 1.5, South Perth and Fremantle well above 2. Now, don't get me wrong, that can be regular in some parts of it, but I'm seeing ones even in normal, I'd say, middle-class streets that I wouldn't expect to happen, and that's continuing to happen. In saying that, for Perth, there's good opportunity in some Joondalup and City Beach suburbs, so don't get confused too much by Perth. There is still some good opportunities. Look, it's not a market I'd buy in for an investment, should I say, but if you need to live there, and the reason I wouldn't buy it for investment is because it's grown so much in the last 5 or so years. But if you need to live there, I'd say Joondalup in the City Beaches area. So if you draw sort of a line from Mount Lawley up to kind of probably, I'd say, Ocean Reef or so. Up to Joondalup, then across the Ocean Reef, then sort of down to Mossman Pike and join them together as kind of like a rhombus, kind of four-sided shape, a regular shape. That's where I'd say most of the suburbs you want to buy in are. So that's Perth, and that's where we're at for all the major markets that I look into.